In this tutorial we're going to take a look at procedural keying. This is where we would want to separate moving elements from a plate, in this case a hand and arm, without resorting to the tedious and time-consuming approach using animated splines, or as you may know them, rotoscoping. And it's always helpful to look for ways to reduce manual roto work. As I've said, it's extremely time consuming. In most cases it's quite inaccurate, and it's very difficult to deal with things like motion blur, which are naturally occurring and in most cases we would want to retain. Now the subject's arbitrary. I'll just flick this over and just set this looping round. In this case, the example that I'm going to be using is based on footage taken from an old FX PhD tutorial. So we're trying to isolate the hand so that we can add graphics or other elements underneath. In this case, you can see some graphics being applied to this tabletop. You can also see some graphics being applied within the hand itself, which is another reason to be able to isolate it. You can see there that there's an inner and outer glow around the hand. There's that light beam, which is kind of depicting a biometric hand scan, and a skeleton reveal that's occurring underneath it. Okay, so I'll knock that off for now. As I've said, I'm not really interested in covering the graphics today. I'm only really interested in dealing with isolating the hand from the plate so that we can actually perform those kind of operations. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just select my plate and put a garbage mat around it. I'll just maybe have to just pull through the clip just to make sure that I don't cut anything off within. We can see that that's plenty big enough for the shot and the movement within the shot there. We don't cut off any part of the hand. We could actually trim it down a little bit more, but that'll do just fine. Okay, so I'll just name this layer plate, and I'm going to duplicate it. The first thing I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and use a Luma key so that I can kind of keep hold of some of these edges around the around the mat line. So we'll call this the edge layer, and I'm going to do a couple of things. Just bring this into a kind of central position because we're going to want to look at some of the boundaries of the mat line. Now the first thing when we're dealing with Luma keys is we want to basically find the channel that's best to perform it on. If we just flick through these channels, and I'm just using Alt 1 to Alt 4, we can see, if we look at the red channel there, with Luma we're looking for a contrast between the background and the foreground. You can see here that the contrast between the background and foreground is not that great in the red channel. If we look at the green channel, it's much better. If we look at the blue channel, it's slightly better than the green. If we just toddle between them. But the blue channel is notoriously noisy, which means that we're going to get a lot of grain in that. And the difference between the two isn't really that great. So I wouldn't suggest that we go with the blue. I would suggest we go with the green in this particular case, and we'll pull our Luma key on the green channel. So how we would do this? We would start by using the channel combiner effect. So I'm applying that on. I'll actually just lock and turn off my plate for now, so we'll just isolate and look at this layer. So what we're looking to do with the channel combiner is we're looking to kind of replicate the view that we saw when we were looking just at the green channel. So to do that, we'll select the green channel and we will set it to lightness only, just purely and simply because we're dealing with Luma, so we're interested in the lightness values. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull a Luma key. Now there's a whole bunch of ways that we could do this. We could use the extract effect, we could use the Luma key effect. I'm going to use levels just because it gives us a little bit more control. I'm just going to pull this out so I can get at my edges. And essentially what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of pull in on both sides of the histogram, and you can see what happens here. Essentially I'm squeezing out the midtones. So what I'm really looking to achieve, if I just pull this down, is I'm looking to achieve nice soft matte lines, so nice sort of semi-transparent pixels around the matte line. I'm not too concerned with the inner part of the matte, and I'm certainly not too concerned with this area up here, because I'm going to use a different approach to to create a holdout map which takes out everything apart from the edges. So I'm really only interested in the edges. Now obviously the closer together I get with these two areas, say for example we go to this and we come in now and look at the mat line, we can see that we've now got jagged edges, so we haven't got a nice soft line, and as that plays out it would look very staticky and very chewy. So we don't want to be going, we want to be keeping some separation between these, so we've got some semi-transparent areas, some grayscale within there. Okay, we can always come back and tweak these, but for now let's just leave it at that. So how do I make use of it? Well, we've got this layer, we've got this plate layer underneath, and essentially I'm going to perform a combination. I'm going to use the track mat essentially to take the alpha, or in this case the Luma, from the layer above and actually apply it to this layer. So if I come into it and choose Luma Map, you'll see that I actually get the opposite effect, and that's because, again, if we take a look at this, layer, this is black. This is the area that we'd expect to be transparent, and white the area that we'd expect to be opaque. So essentially, we need to flip it. Now we could flip it in two ways. I'll just turn this back off. We could flip it just by adding an invert effect into the layer, which would flip it over. But because we're using a track map, we can just use a Luma inverted. Okay, so we can see straight away now that we've got a pretty good key there. Now, obviously, there are areas at the top of this where we've got, where we've got sort of grotty areas from the plate around that table edge, and we've potentially also got some holes inside the mat. We'll just take a little look. I don't think it was too bad, but obviously there's some ambiguous areas up here where the arm intersects with the table. And I'm just looking that there may be some areas within the hand at certain areas on the faster movement where we've got a little bit of motion blur. But anyway, we'll come back to that if we need to. But for now, let's just say that we're happy with that. So we've got ourselves potentially a nice edge for the mat. What we need to do now is we need to use a holdout mat now to get rid of everything else apart from sort of the inner areas of the hand. So to do this, I'm just going to go and get my plate again and bring it in and stick it into the comp. This is another plate, and again I'm going to use the same track mat approach. So I'll just turn off and lock these for now so that we can focus on the holdout mat. I'm going to duplicate it, and this is going to be the holdout layer. I'll turn it off so that we're just looking at this one particular layer. Now this is fairly straightforward. I'm just going to use key light for this. And this is using key light in a way that some of you may not have used before. We're typically used to removing green screens or blue screens using it. I'm actually going to be removing flesh tones on here. So I'm just going to make an arbitrary selection of a flesh tone, and we can see the effect that has straight away if we just flick into the alpha channel. Now don't forget that in this particular case we're not interested in the edges. We've got our edges already. What we're interested in here is making sure that we've got a completely solid or opaque hand and arm, and a complete transparent backdrop. So I'm not interested in the edges, so I'm not too concerned about the gain. I can go up a little bit further than what I would normally do, and I'll do the rest with the screen map. So I'm bringing the screen mat up, and you can see that what I'm essentially doing is in fact, just before I go any further, I'll just go get that mask, and I'll just paste that onto these two layers. I ought really to have duplicated my plate from the comp itself, but anyway. Okay, so back to the sort of the matter in hand. We're looking to bring up the clip black and get rid of any element of grey or white within the boundaries of the mat. Once we've done that, then we can bring the clip white down, and we can bring it right down. The value here is 63. We can bring this right down. As long as we don't go beyond 63, we can come right down to that point. Now you can see straight away that that introduces this real harsh edge. There's absolutely no midtones in here at all. We've got blacks, we've got whites, and that's it. So we've got no scope for a soft edge here, but that doesn't matter because we've got that underneath. Now obviously we don't. This is sat over the top of the edge mat, and this is going to sit over the top, and therefore it's going to obscure the nice soft edge that we've got underneath. So we're just going to use the screen shrink. I'll just come out a little bit. I'm just going to use the screen shrink element of the effect, and just we can see there that if I extend that, you can see I pull that right in. Then then you can see what it's doing. It's basically eroding the edge of the mat. Now I'm just coming in. I'm just going to come in by a value of 1 or something like that, just so that it's far enough in from the boundary of the mat line, so that the edge and the layer below can be seen. Okay, so I'm just going to come back to RGB. I'm going to set that to intermediate result, just so that it doesn't apply any spill suppression. I don't want it to change the colour based on that selection that I've made. And now it's the same approach as before. I take my plate and I use the transparency from the layer above and apply it to the plate. So in this particular case, again, if I choose the alpha matte, you'll see that that's having the opposite effect as what I want, because if we go back to this layer, we know that this is the wrong way around. This is currently transparent and this is opaque. So again, we need to use an inverted approach. So you can see now what we've got. We've got a complete key. You can see that the only one layer that is actually taken on. This is a concatenation, so essentially this is the only layer that's actually turned on, and the others are actually extracting their transparent values from the layers below. So you can see there that we've got a reasonable mat. Now what we would do now normally is that we would be scrubbing through here, just looking for areas of degradation. Sometimes, I have done this a couple of times already, sometimes we might get a little bit of leakage in this area, and a little bit in between the fingers down here. And we can address that just by coming back to our key light, because obviously this is the fill area, and we can just pull these in again if we don't want to be exceeding that, but you can see there that we can actually pull and push at the holdout mat to deal with any unwanted elements, and then just reset it once we get to the end. So you can see there now that we've got a good mat. We can use this now as a pre-comp. We can use it as many times as we want. We can apply anything we want then under that possibly inside an assembly comp, and put whatever graphics we want underneath it. We can also use this as a basis for applying effects within the hand itself. So that's the principle. As I said, it's a principle that has been spoken about by Mark Christiansen for a long time, but as I've said, I'm absolutely amazed at how many times people just resort straight to masks as a way of dealing with problems like this. Incredibly tedious, incredibly time consuming. You can see how straightforward this kind of approach is. Now it won't stop you entirely from using masks, but it'll certainly reduce the amount of times that you need to. Okay, I hope you found that useful.